The September BCA Speaker Series starts now. Here is Ron Jaworski.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're coming to you from the National Constitution Center. Oh, and does it feel good to be here and have some real people joining us. It's going to be a very fun event. And I really feel like we're getting maybe one step closer to normalcy. I sure hope I'm right. We're also joined by a live audience. Members, thank you so much for joining us here at the National Constitution Center. And also, the members have been such a great supporter of this event and the BCA through the years. We are deeply indebted to you taking time to join us. And the members are the best. Also joining us is Jolene Jaworski, president of BCA, Sean Orenstein, the managing partner, former Tistler-Kiffany, now called One Digital, and of course our very special guest and featured speaker, Lauren Manning. Lauren, great to have you with us.
It's great to be with you all today.
Absolutely inspiring to have you with us. We are so excited that you've taken time out of your very demanding schedule to join us here and tell us your story. We've all been tested, I guess, over the last 6 or 7 months, and it's been a roller coaster ride for everyone. And it seems like every day we're trying to pivot and find a way to lead our communities, to lead our families, to lead our business. And it really does boil down to leadership in these very unprecedented times. And to help each other stay strong and resilient is really critical. And having these types of discussions and be open and honest about handling all the disruptions that we've been dealt with over the past, going back to March, we've all been disrupted in our way we are living our lives. And it's great to have Sean up here. Not only is he's just an awesome part of what BCA does and active in our community, but him personally and his company, Tistler-Kiffany, was acquired by One Digital just before the pandemic hit. And certainly his business, his life, the transition must have been, to a certain degree, very, very much of an interruption to your lifestyle, your family, and your business. So what did you learn from what you had to do and pivot after the acquisition was made by One Digital?
Joining One Digital, there was a lot of change, and change is uncomfortable for a lot of people, but the lessons that I'm learning and the lessons that we're learning is that we're keeping perspective. We're also extremely grateful. There's a lot to be thankful for, and just trying to maintain that level of insight is helpful getting through this. So much has occurred almost immediately following joining One Digital. Obviously, the continued health crisis and the impact on unemployment, and then the pain but hopeful change that we're dealing with racial inequality in our country. So I know that resilience is the theme for today. But first, I'm humbled to be here virtually with Lauren and to hear her very inspirational story. I'm guessing that part of the reason for Lauren's strength and what she has been able to overcome and achieve was to honor the associates that were killed in 9/11. And when you think about it's our own teams that make us so resilient, and the successes that we have are because of our people. I just feel very, very fortunate to be able to be working with a great group of people at One Digital, locally, regionally, nationally. And we've been handed some daunting challenges over the last 9 months since we joined in January. And I believe and I know that we're going to be stronger as one as we get through this together. And it's also important to address what our collective organizations are doing to address diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Remaining silent is enabling the status quo, and One Digital has developed a number of workforce resources to help employers navigate and facilitate these unfamiliar discussions between leaders, employees, and their clients. In addition, the entire One Digital organization is expanding our fundraising efforts, and beginning the week of October 26th, we're sponsoring a national One Digital virtual 5K, and proceeds will be made to organizations all across the country that have a diversity, equity, and inclusion focus. As a BCA community, we also recognize the importance of this topic and the need for us to be part of the solution. Jolene, she recognizes that action speaks louder than words, and also at the end of October, the BCA will be forming an equity transition team. So if you would like to have a voice in our direction and be part of the change in the BCA, we're looking for your leadership. So please reach out to any BCA associate and let them know that you would like to be part of this transformation team, and we're going to get things moving forward in the right direction. So thanks to be here, Ron.
Sean, thank you so much for your amazing leadership. You've really given BCA a big piece of your heart, and we really appreciate that for all the great things you're doing, not only for BCA, but for everyone in this community. So thank you so very, very much. Been great leader, so we appreciate that. Now it's time to bring in our very special guest, Laura Manning. And before I turn it over to Laura, let me give you a little background on what a wonderful person she is. A former partner at Cantor Fitzgerald, Lauren Manning fought to survive the unthinkable when terror struck the World Trade Center on 9/11. She was burned over 80% of her body and endured catastrophic injury and devastating loss. Her will to live and her resolve to build continues to resonate so powerfully. Today, she is active on many nonprofits. Those boards do great work and is currently the managing director at Golden Seeds, one of the nation's leading early-stage investment firms for women-led companies. Lauren, I am honored to turn the program over to you. Welcome to BCA.
Thank you very much, and for those kind words. I really appreciate it. Well, as you just heard, the story I have to tell you today is in most and always about the improbable, truly, and the impossible. It is a story that's ultimately a calling to each of you, that when life presents tests, many that we are having right now amidst the pandemic, and when you are compelled to draw upon your own unmeasured strength, that you will find it there in answer to your call, no matter how difficult, no matter how grave the challenge. You know, the inclination when tragedy strikes is often to withdraw in fear. It's a physical reaction based on the endorphins in our body, and to move against that, to lean into that fear is often one of the most difficult things to do, especially when chaos is all around you, because the unknown can be overwhelming and paralyzing. What matters the most is our connection to ourselves and with each other, our families, our colleagues, our friends. There are no real easy answers, but one thing I can tell you is that my connections with others were instrumental in helping me fight my battle to survive. The connections that I was able to sustain gave hope and solace, not only to my family and friends and colleagues that remained, but to many of those who were praying in support of me from around the world. On September 11th, I was heading to my office on the 105th floor of the One World Trade Center, now more commonly known as the North Tower. At 8:45, I entered the lobby, and to my right were two women that I smiled at as I passed to turn left toward the elevator banks that would take me to the Sky Lobby and on up to 105. As I turned, suddenly the entire building shuddered. It was as if everything moved. The atmosphere was surreal. There was a punctuated, immediate, loud, piercing, whistling sound that intensified over the 2 seconds before a wall of fire, 1,000-degree heat burst out from the elevator shafts that ran the full 110 stories of the building. There are 3 of them that did, and ignited everything and everyone in its path. The superheated air spun me around, and where the 2 women who had been standing just moments before, their bodies were now lying on the floor covered in flames. And like them, I was on fire. I could not breathe. My voice was powerless. I battled a gale force backdraft that was pulling me back in onto the flames as I battled to reach that sidewalk where I had stood only moments before. When it finally released, I found myself spit back out onto the sidewalk finally and released. And I had traveled maybe 60 feet, but I was in a completely completely different world. And I screamed, this can't be real. This can't be happening. Finally able to take a fuller breath while still on flames. The pain was unimaginable and the burn's grip continued to push in. I could not get out from under it. I could not get away from it. And everywhere was nothing but concrete and macadam, except for this small strip of grass that, like we're all familiar with where we are, you notice the changes in your neighborhood, in your work environment that lay across in front of the World Financial Center. And I realized that my only chance was to get back across these 6 lanes of highway to that small strip of grass to drop and roll, as we all learn. And all I could think of as I started running across that highway was my son, Tyler. He's just 10 months old. And we had tried for years to have a child. And I screamed to him, I can't leave you now. I won't leave you now. I haven't had you long enough. And when I finally reached that narrow strip of grass, I dropped and I rolled. And 2 men on their way to Lehman Brothers, bond traders, the firm that I had started my training at fresh out of college, bounded across that strip of grass. There were a couple other people who had battled themselves out of that building, and they lay motionless. And one of them came to help me as I screamed, we got to get the hell out of here. Get me to a hospital. Let's go. And what ensued amidst that agony and in those moments that turned into minutes, that turned into more than half an hour, was the glass breaking, the steel wailing as it bent, and objects and people started crashing to the ground. The tower's upper stories were in flames, and the snake-like black trail of smoke colored the sky. It was all-consuming pain as it burrowed deeper and deeper through my skin. And I found myself in that moment truly, truly slipping away amidst the pain, and the impulse to let go became overwhelming. And I prayed for death in this unspeakable moment of cacophony. And though I did not even believe at that time that I could be rescued from the pain in death. And I realized this was it. This was my choice. And I could either keep fighting, try to grip back at the consciousness that I still had, or surrender, and that I would die on the side of that highway that day. And so I chose, and I decided to live. Finally, 20 minutes later, an ambulance showed up. Of course, it was on the other side. The people were running toward the building. And at this point, that's where I needed to go. I needed to head back toward the burning building. And on this day, someone else helped me and held my arm as we crossed back over 6 lanes of highway to that waiting ambulance. They threw me in on the floor of it. It was obvious I was pegged as a goner, and 55 minutes after the first plane had struck, less than 10 minutes before the South Tower fell, that ambulance pulled away from the Trade Center. I would remain conscious that day for another 5 hours at the first stop I made, St. Vincent's. The pain was unimaginable. The hospital, doing the best they could, just simply wasn't trained heavily in burn protocol. And a social worker on the ICU floor saw what was going down on, and she went down to the chapel to pray. She walked out of the chapel, and countless people at this point, medical personnel, were coming in off the streets at hospitals all over the city, volunteering to help out. And she called out, are there any burn nurses here? Are there any burn doctors here? And miraculously, 2 women on vacation from Minnesota stepped forward and said, we're burn nurses. What can we do? They scrubbed in, they entered the room. I was intubated, and finally, the burn care began that I had needed so desperately hours before. And that night, they let me on a release in an ambulance along with my husband in an induced coma up to Weill Cornell, where there at a burn center, I would begin to receive the actual deep-seated care that I would need over the next 3 months. And as Ron mentioned earlier, I suffered over actually an 82.5% burn, most of it 3rd degree and portions of it 4th degree. My odds of survival hovered in the single digits for months at a time. And I existed beyond any of those proverbial bell curves of life. I should have been dead multiple times. I battled near lethal infections. I suffered multiple and ongoing amputations, collapsed lungs, and a host of other challenges. And it would not be for months until I was finally brought out of the induced coma to find myself unable to move. I could not speak. I could not breathe on my own. I was more helpless than an infant. And my world had collapsed into the true immediacy of now. And surviving was a matter of trying to breathe from one moment to the next, with the intense labor and in spite of the machines helping me do it. And it would not be until late November that I would learn 658 of my colleagues at Cantor Fitzgerald had been killed. Close friends were dead, that the Pentagon had been hit, and our country was at war. And I vowed at that moment that I would avenge all of those that I had loved who were gone and that they wouldn't get one more. If I could do anything about it, I wasn't going to die in that hospital bed, just as I had vowed not to die on the side of that highway. And I am so grateful to the countless people, even from the early days, that shared letters and words of hope and support through my husband's emails, and the hundreds of Cantor Fitzgerald families who cheered me on because the hope they had for their loved ones as the weeks went on had dissipated, as it was obvious no one virtually had made it out of the building, and certainly no one on the 102nd to 105th floors. And those connections, and through them, and all of those who perished that day, I believe the spirits remain with me. The prayers and the words and the letters lifted and carried me through some of my darkest hours. And I pledged that I would not let them or anyone down. So from my first physical milestones to the much later ones, they involved the simplest of activities. I had, in essence, become an infant again, more evenly matched with the age of my son than any peer. Things we take for granted, learning to breathe again on my own, learning to speak again, to learn to sit, to get into and out of a bed. And it would be years before I could do any of that without great assistance. Learning to walk again. These first victories came in the smallest of matters and ways, and I learned to rejoice in the smallest of accomplishments. And I knew early on from the debriefings that I had with the doctors and the questions that any of us, whether we're advocating for ourselves or for a parent or a child, learn that it would be a relentless and prescribed period of time within which I could get better. And I learned and I studied what I needed to do. It was a marathon of magnificent proportions that would last nearly a decade. And on the day where I was able to walk and with assistance and to a nurse's station where doctors and therapists and others had gathered, and as I reached it, started clapping and cheering, with tears coming from their eyes, I saw how much hope had been invested in me, and that my success was theirs, and that it was ours, and that my battle was their battle, and that we were indeed a team. Everyone knew their job and how to do it, and there was really zero tolerance for failure. My biggest win came in late November when I was finally able to reunite with my son for a very limited period. I was extremely anxious and fearful of what this child would think of his mother, who looked nothing like and was nothing like the mom that had left him those months ago. And as the small figure came walking down a hallway, he had only been crawling before, carrying a little red balloon that said, "I love you," I was shocked with a happiness that was really immeasurable. And he came up to me, looking at me with fear in his eyes, and turned away. And everything that I thought would happen, I saw unfolding in that moment, that he would reject me. And he turned around and looked more closely, and a small smile crossed his face. And in that moment, everything that I had fought for, everything that I had battled for, in that moment was delivered in the gift of finding my son and I were not lost to each other. And once again, the smallest of beings, the smallest of things fueled my reserve to keep on. There were many breakthroughs, but many, many more setbacks. And I came to recognize that the defeats were temporary and that I could accept them without letting them conquer me. I survived, I believe, against all medical odds because of will, because of faith, and because of the love from those around me, and the will to try, and the faith that I could and would succeed at any cost, because I had the help of many, an extraordinary team. But there is nothing going on unless you yourself believe, because you don't know how strong you are until it really is your only option. And I knew on the morning of September 11th that I would not die by the side of that highway, that if I could fight through that fire, extinguish the flames, escape that war zone, take that next breath, if I could learn to walk again, to talk again, to use my hands again, that I could live in a body that was radically changed, but a life that I clung to, that I wanted would still be there for the taking. Because the most successful people are most often those who have the most conviction and the most passion. And they aren't always the smartest ones in the room, but they are the most driven, the most willing to adjust to the real conditions they face. The key to survival truly is being adaptable to change and being decisive enough not to get paralyzed by it. Make a mistake in my business, I had learned, and millions of dollars are lost in an instant, your career over in the next. Make a strategic mistake, and your company fails. And I saw through the years the firms that refused to adapt, evolve, or melt away. Household names now long gone. Complacency bred their extinction, and the firms with the courage to try new things in my business are still around or thriving better than ever. Because success in business, I learned, was a matter of life and death. And then one day, on the way to work, I learned through my experience that life and death is also a matter of business. And I already knew that change was not just okay, that it was inevitable. And I knew my life would be forever different, but I wouldn't let that fear become paralyzing. I figured I'm going to give it my best shot. So I embraced the life I still had, and I couldn't have traveled a further distance. And like we all have in life, what we all hope for as parents and CEOs and leaders is to share those lessons of our own mistakes and imperfections. I'll share with you my own. Number one, Defeat is temporary. Defeat is temporary. My parents had raised my brother and sister and I to understand you're not the first person things have happened to. And when they do, there's only one direction to go, and that is forward, wherever it may take you. Now, I had been catastrophically injured in what was an active war. Pain was my enemy. I studied it and anticipated the ways and understanding the burn business as I came to know it, how it would take me down. And each night before I fell asleep in what were many dreamless or nightmare-filled nights, I figured out a way I would look to conquer it. The next day, how could I win? The win truly is only in our efforts. It's not in that absolute scoreboard. Whether you're on the playing field, as I learned through my years playing lacrosse, or you're in the boardroom. It's about making the effort and showing your team that you are decisive, that you want to be counted in, and that you are there with them in all ways. I arrived at a rehabilitation hospital months after I was wounded. And it was the first time I had an opportunity to look in a mirror. And by choice, it was something I had decided not to do for quite a while. And on that day, when I decided to, I found the tears rolling down my face, for there was this being that looked nothing like I did before, covered in a silicone mask, disabling, disfiguring scars everywhere. Forever afterward, really. But I managed to look past that image and see beyond the obvious truth. And I made that immediate pivot that I would not let those negative emotions subsume me, but rather coexist. And I willed myself to look past my circumstances, and that I would project a confidence and be so present and so forthright and so convincingly unharmed that when people saw me, they wouldn't notice any scars. They would not see a terribly injured person. And at some point over the last 19 years, although the mirror certainly tells and the camera tells a different story, that charade, that wonderful one-act play for myself became my reality. And although the scars remain, a new version of myself, and hopefully an improved one, as my husband would hope, and children, is a better one. Because even in the most unpredictable of situations where chaos is all around you, and especially then, your ability to focus on your goals, however they need to morph, and work to achieve them, is what will carry you through. And I had a lot of breakthroughs. And as I mentioned, plenty more setbacks. But the harder it came, the harder I pushed back. And I realized I could let those setbacks become part of who I was. And that feigned belief that I needed to do it all, have it all, and not make a mistake, that notion of imperfection, I realized is a good thing in life. And that I would let it exist without letting it conquer me. The path to success and the path to failure are the same. And despite all my best strategic and tactical planning, and any of yours in the last 6 or 7 months, no doubt, the unexpected always does happen. And I would say this to people a few scant years ago, and before that, when the recession of '08 had hit, it's that competitor that comes out of nowhere. A worldwide pandemic, who would have thought? Regulations that are keeping our businesses curtailed or offline or mitigated to a place that doesn't allow us to manage or even understand what our P&L might be in the next quarter. But you can't regret what you haven't done and what you can't change. You have to look to what you can do. And I confronted defeat, but it was my response that mattered. And one of the things I learned in business and in my recovery is to understand the difference. When you cannot execute the plan, you've got the wrong plan. Be decisive. You must revise it, drop it, or you will fail. Be persistent. because we don't know how strong we are until it is our only option. Because we all experience moments of adversity when we feel we are at our weakest. And yet, when you look back, you saw even then you had the power to choose, to act. And we tell ourselves, oh, if I only knew then what I know now. But if that exercise should teach us anything, it's that if we had understood our true power then, we may not have felt such doubt. Because the lesson is not how strong you may have been back then. It's about how strong you are right here, right now. When I came out of the rehab hospital, I had been away for more than half a year, and my hands were 2 mitts at the end of my arms. I could not bend them. There were pins protruding from them, amputations. It was a disturbing scene, to say the least, and they thought I would never regain much function. But I vowed that I would. I wasn't going to let some statistic dictate what I needed to do. And so I worked and I figured out ways that worked for my body. And my hands, to a greater and lesser degree on any given day, went from this to this to this. And the ability to make a fist, which is really just a way I had to reach in and grasp my son's small hand and hold him. This is our unmeasured strength. This is what we have within each of us to conquer the things we cannot begin to believe that we might be able to achieve. Because my experience in injury taught me every morning, when you have the privilege to open your eyes, remember, this is it, this day, right here, right now. So I implore you to gather your courage, take the steps of commitment, those steps of leadership, the steps that will be remembered by your family, by your colleagues, by your company, and your community for generations to come. Remember, every day you have a choice. Make it count. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Lauren, it was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so very, very much. Just inspiring to all of us, and we wish you the very best. And you talked about choices. I think BCA made a great choice in having you speak to us today. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Lauren,
What a pleasure.
thank you so very much. We really can't thank you, Lauren, enough for just sharing those experiences with us. Before we get to our closing remarks, we want to highlight some of the upcoming experiences which we'll have at BCA.
On October 6th and 12th, a wine tasting with certified sommelier and managing partner of the Capital Grille King of Prussia, Christopher Ammon. Due to COVID restrictions, the maximum in-person attendance is 30 people, so members and their guests can RSVP for either October 6th or 12th. At the end of October, we'll host the inaugural meeting of the BCA Equity Transformation Team. If you want to be part of the team, please contact any BCA staff member. On November 5th, after delivering a tasty treat in May, 12th Street Catering will present its second virtual cooking class. And last but not least, we have a very exciting breakfast in the evening planned with a comedic twist. Keep an eye out for more details.
To wrap up our program, we've invited a couple members from the audience to join us to wrap the show up. We'll start out with Steve Jeffries, who's the co-founder of Precision Realty Group, and Dr. Brandy Nemchenko, the owner of Experience Chiropractic. Great to have you guys with us. Thank you so very much. You know, kind of the word that we hear so much about over the last 6 or 7 months has been pivot. You know, it seems like I know in my business, which is food and beverage and golf, you wake up every morning and make adjustments, pivot, you know, because things change every single day. Steve, in your business, how much have you had to pivot over the last 7 months?
Wow, I don't even quite know how many times we've had to pivot even month to month throughout this pandemic. But in our business, even pre-pandemic, it was, what inning are we in our business? What inning are we in? Are we at the 7th inning stretch yet? Do we still have business to do? So we were already contemplating how to pivot. We were unfortunately doing a ton of retail. So we've had to pivot through relationships into things like distribution and grocery and things we weren't doing. But the only way we could do that is through relationships that we have, such as BCA. People, one thing that was really prevalent during the speech was people cared about Cantor Fitzgerald. They took them in at the end of this. They helped them with space, with deals, with the way to facilitate. I can't tell you how many relationships we've had that gave us an opportunity to do something maybe Precision, our company, wasn't perfect designed for. But we helped them in the past. So they gave it back to us. They made sure that we were going to be okay because of the relationships we had, throughout the years. And, just like they were, we couldn't be more grateful for that.
Brady, what adjustments have you had to make?
That's a great pun.
I'm a witty guy.
Just navigating, I can't even make my employees come in for a snow day. So to come in during a pandemic was like very frightening. So I know we're gonna look back at this as a magical time, because it was a time where the first 3 weeks, I think all of us watched 90 Day Fiance and drank a lot of stuff. And it was sort of a bonding frat kind of thing of Hell Week or Hell 3 Week. And when we didn't get the PPP loan, it was really frightening. I think I was on a call that day with you guys drinking gin. But like Steve said, like people were so supportive, because it's like I sort of alluded to, you got to get up off the floor. Like you can only lay on the floor and cry so long before you got to get up and do it. And having a team of guys, Jim was part of that, who gave me some tough love and smacked me around a little bit and used some humor. It definitely served us well. We're up 25%. We have an amazing team that has been through hell together. And it's a time that I'll always cherish. In the first 3 weeks of COVID, I would say that I was very angry that I didn't hit the goals that I did in practice as a mom, and also with my book and my webinars. Like that, I came up with 3 legacy goals. I shared it with Karen. I have 3 legacy goals that I'm hell-bent that I will hit, that I have to hit them now. So it's really invigorated me to decide exactly what I want, exactly how I want to be, the type of person I want to be. And I can't thank BCA enough, because as I said, that tough love session was really cathartic for me, and just the relationships that I had.
Brandy, you touched on it about the support system, and that's what we heard from Lauren when she said what it took for her to get through what she went through. It was the love of her family, her friends, and her, the team at Cantor Fitzgerald. And that support system is no different than the support system that we talk about within BCA. And that's been the mantra since Jolene started the organization 12 years ago. Build relationships before you need them. And that's been really what this organization has been, to be able to support each other over the last 7 months with the pandemic. And more than ever, we've needed each other. And just the individual love that we've been able to give each other, and the conversations, whether it was the one-on-ones that you had, or whether it was the group sessions, or whether it was these types of mini events. This is what it's all about. This is, I think, what you dreamed of when you kind of built BCA, maybe not even having the perspective, but this is the family that BCA has been able to build, and no better time than in a crisis and a pandemic has it demonstrated the value of these relationships. It's also how innovative. I mean, it's amazing when you listen to BCA members, the things that people are doing to reinvent their business. It's exciting. I mean, it's exciting, the things that Karen, that you're doing, and Michelle, the things that you're doing in your business, and things that you never ever thought about, ever. And you totally reimagined what business is going to look like in the future, and it's going to make you better and stronger. It's going to make us better and stronger, and the fact that we can be part of this journey with you, it's going to help all of us. It's a long journey ahead of us. We're not going to get out of this too quickly, and it's how we're going to handle these challenges.
Being in the audience today, one of the biggest bummers is the fact that all the members were not able to be here, because I've been a member a really long time and heard a lot of keynote speeches. I don't want to get emotional, but today was one of the best speakers we've ever had. Her message was unbelievable because it was both, we can all relate. Everyone knows where they were at that time and day and how they dealt with it, and being in the Mid-Atlantic region, we've all had people affected, that we know. So today was amazing, but the lessons from it business-wise, one of the things that every speaker's always had is how to motivate our teams. There's always a takeaway that us as members say, how can I take from that speaker, implement it into our team? And that's kind of, what I've taken out of this pandemic from an internal standpoint in our company. We try to pump each other up. We have a lot of young people, older people, and today just added to the inspiration that every speaker always has.
Well, Lauren did mention the word love to close out her presentation, and clearly, Steve, what you're talking about is the love we have for each other, and we love you all very much.